So my name's Mel. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Australia, but I currently live in Phuket, Thailand, and I'm training out of Tiger Muay Thai. I'm a pro-female MMA fighter, so that's pretty much why I'm here at Tiger, is to continue to train and develop my career. I grew up in a town called Newcastle, which is on the east coast, and that's pretty much where I grew up my entire life. So when I was in Newcastle, I was going through school, and I kind of had a very traditional path set out for me. School, university, continuing to a job from university, and then when I was about 17, I kind of wanted to get fit, and I started at a MMA gym. Didn't really know what MMA was, to be honest, and then from there it kind of really changed my life and the direction of my life, and opened up so many more opportunities within Australia and outside of Australia. I've been travelling for fight shows, and I've travelled a lot of Southeast Asia just through MMA. So Australia is always going to be like it's home for me, but I have a really strong love of Thailand, which is part of the reason why I chose Thailand to become an expat here. But yeah, Australia and Newcastle as well, the beaches in Newcastle, and that will always feel like home to me as well. So I've got a few roots in a few different places, but yeah, I am Australian, but I love Phuket as well.
Did you start with MMA, or did you have some other? Oh, you did start with MMA. So talk about that, stepping in and beginning with straight MMA.
Yeah. So this has a little bit of a story behind it. But when I was 17, I wanted to learn kickboxing. I didn't really know what kickboxing was, to be honest. I didn't know what Muay Thai was. Just was like, boxing with kicks, that sounds kind of fun. That sounds like something that I'd be interested in. And tried to get a couple of friends to come with me, found a gym online. None of my friends ended up coming, and I walked into a gym and said, look, I want to start training. And they said, no worries, come tomorrow. And you can start tomorrow. And I said, okay, great. And then I walked in, and my first ever class was an advanced jiu-jitsu class. I had not a clue what jiu-jitsu was. I had not a clue what MMA was. And the first thing was, some guy that I didn't know pulling me into guard and going, okay, this is guard. And I'm going, oh my God, what? But I went back the next day and the day after that, and then fell in love with the sport, and have been in MMA pretty religiously since that day. So I didn't actually start with anything other than MMA. So that's kind of how it all happened for me, is I didn't know what it was, and I was already training it. So kind of chose the path for me, really.
All right, so now how did you end up here in Phuket?
Yeah, so after my first fight, which was 2016, I had a friend that I was travelling with at the time who said he'd been to Tiger Muay Thai before. He's my now current partner, but he'd been to Tiger Muay Thai, and he said, look, if you love this sport, Thailand's just, it's a different realm of training. It's so much more intense than what we're used to in Australia, and there's a level of talent here that you can't get anywhere else in the world, and you can't get coaching like this anywhere else in the world. So he said, come to Tiger Muay Thai, we'll travel, we'll see a bit of the world and things like that. And so I just came along and discovered Tiger Muay Thai, and really just fell in love with Thailand about that time as well. So.
Since, moving over here, how has your development been going?
Oh, it's phenomenal, like I was saying before, you can't beat the coaching and the training here, and just the level of talent that walks onto the mats every day. You've got everyone from 1FC fighters, Bellator fighters, Invicta fighters, UFC fighters, like all training on the same mat, training under the same coaches, and you really just can't beat that level of intensity, I guess. So as far as developing as an athlete, like this is the place to be, and it will remain to be the place to be for a while, I think. But yeah, it's crazy how much, just even the first time I did 2 weeks here, how much my training changed from that point. And it's been a really big part of my development, all the trips that I've done here. And that's why I ultimately chose Tiger Muay Thai to move here, is because of all the development that it brought to my career. So,
other than, development and fighting, has there been other changes you have made since moving over here that you did not implement when you were in Australia? Definitely
health-wise, the food choices, you'll hear people talk about it on the soy. It's really hard to be unhealthy in this part of Thailand. It's really hard to find chocolate and ice cream and lollies. So, every day you're going and you're eating fresh vegetables and chicken and rice, and just it's really a shift in your overall health and your overall eating. And even I find, I grew up on the coast, I love the beach, and for 9 months of the year, you can't swim in the water in Australia because it's too cold where I'm from. So I love the summer, I love the heat, I love sweating all the time on the mat. So I really love being here and being in the heat. It feels healthier for me. So
if there are any struggles, everybody considered it paradise, but are there any struggles, as a up and coming fighter here in Phuket?
The lack of Tim Tams, mostly. I think it's kind of hard. There is a fair bit of competition to be seen and to be recognised over here. There is a large pool of talent and a large depth of people, which is great for your growth as a fighter, but when you're someone that's trying to be recognised on the scene, some people will find that as a little bit of a setback, but I think for your overall growth, it's probably a good thing in the long run. And money struggles, obviously, as a young fighter moving overseas and bringing your life here. It's quite a costly way to do it, but it's definitely worth it, like I said, for the long run.
Let's talk about your career so far. You made your pro debut in 2016. Talk about going into that fight, what transpired.
That's another one as well that I kind of walked into fairly blindly, as I've been famous for in my career. But I debuted at 18 years old, and as a female at that time it was you fight pro or you don't fight anyone at all. So I walked into that fight with 18 months training experience, which is now, as you get further into your career, you realise how crazy that is to walk into a cage with 18 months experience. But I had great people looking after me that camp, and I walked into it and got hit in the face with a 4-ounce glove for the first time and realised how much it hurts, but also how much I loved it and how much it continued to make me fall in love with the sport. It was probably not very nerve-wracking until the cage door locked, and then everyone has that moment of where your adrenaline hits and you realise, oh my god, this is real. I'm fighting someone hand to hand. So yeah, it was a life-changing experience, and I was fairly inexperienced in MMA at the time, so it was a huge part of understanding that this is where I want to go with my life and my career.
You fought for the second time the next year at Brace, which is a much bigger promotion than your first your debut, right? Now it was a very close fight.
Yeah.
Talk about you jumped into your pro debut, and then your second fight you had some experience, but you go in there and you fight hard, but it's such a close fight, and then you come out on the losing end. How did that feel for you?
That's a fairly, I guess, emotional topic for any fighter to touch upon. Losing a split decision, especially sometimes, you may not always feel like you came out of that cage and you lost that fight. But I think overall people talk about, you win or you learn. And I've learnt a lot I've got 2 decision losses. One of them was a fight of the night on my debut, and one of them was a split decision. And I think they're going to be 2 of the hardest fights of my career, just from the lessons that they brought and the emotions that they did bring afterwards, and how much it hurts as they talk about the sport being the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows, and it was a huge low for me in my career, but it motivates you every day, it pushes you every day, to overcome that struggle. And a lot of people can't handle that and they end up quitting the sport, but that's not me. I love this sport, so I'm going to use it to push myself and to continue to grow. And I really took some time after that fight to work on my skills and to work on the reasons why it was a close fight and why I didn't dominate, and I'm coming into the next fight better prepared because of that loss,
Yeah, you did take some time after that fight. It's been over 2 years, right? And you're returning.
Yeah.
In that time, have you been here the whole time?
No, I haven't. So I moved here in January of this year, so the end of January. But during that time, I initially took about 6 months, and then I ended up having a pretty catastrophic knee injury, so I also had to rehabilitate that, come off that. Tearing ligaments in your knee is quite a lengthy process, so that's part of the reason why it's actually been so long. It would have been 6 months if it could have been 6 months, but unfortunately for me that's how things go, and it's also another reason that pushes me and motivates me is overcoming something like an injury like that to move on to the next one and feel good and feel ready to go. So
Yeah, that's, you went through a lot in your first couple years as a professional.
Yeah.
Taking that time off is probably the best medicine, you could have,
exactly.
probably, right?
Yeah.
Now you're going into your third fight, Eternal MMA 45. You're taking on Chelsea Hackett on May 25th. Talk about that fight and your opponent. What are your thoughts on her?
So this is another funny Mel walking into something blind leads, but I saw the promoter Eternal MMA put up a couple of weeks ago that they were looking for a last minute replacement, and I messaged Cam and I said, look, I'll be on a plane tomorrow and I'll fight for you Saturday, and of course flying back to Australia and things, the timeline didn't quite line up, but from that he offered me the fight. He said, if this is a fight that you want, a matchup that you want, and I said yes. So I believe Chelsea's a Muay Thai girl, and that's about as far into it as I've looked. I really just wanted to focus on myself and how I'm preparing for the fight rather than what my opponent might do. But I have a pretty clear game plan in my head of how everything's going to go down, and I'm really looking forward to having a good fight against a tough opponent. So yeah, that's about it on that.
I think this fight is very pivotal for you. You've been through so much, in the first couple of years. And you've been training for so long now, just focused on pretty much your training camp has been longer than normal. Normal training camps are like 8 weeks or whatever. You've probably been in training camp for how long, so long. So going into this fight, what are the emotions like for you preparing?
Yeah, it's pretty intense. I mean, obviously everyone's got a little bit of fear and doubt, but mostly I feel like it's my time. I feel completely ready to go, and I kind of look back on when I made my debut and I laugh at the confidence that I had going into that cage compared to where my skill level is now. Part of me can't believe that I managed to do it on such little skill and such little experience in training. So now I'm so much more experienced. So I have great confidence that this fight's going to go my way, and it's going to be a really good fight for me. So I'm pretty excited more than anything, and I just want it done. I want it here. I want it to be tomorrow. So I pretty much can't wait for it now. It's been too long. So
I know you're just focused on this fight coming up, but do you have any long-term goals for yourself? Do you have, where do you want to be in the next couple of years?
Ideally in the next couple of years I'll get signed to a reputable promotion, start looking at, obviously I'm based in Southeast Asia and 1FC is kind of the standard in Asia at the moment, so looking forward at the future, I'd love to be fighting on 1FC, and they've really signed some of the best in the region, so I'd love to test myself and test my skills and ultimately just continue on from there, keep succeeding at what I do and what I love. So.